talk a little bit about your impressions on this issue and the need to focus on it.
Thanks, Hank. I don't know if all of you are feeling the same thing I'm feeling. I've never had a concussion, never experienced that. But I think every coach across the country needs to hear these kinds of testimonies, because I don't think we really understand the gravity of and the seriousness of this injury, and not just in the moment, but how it impacts lives for a long time, if not for the rest of their lives. So I would like to speak from a perspective of a coach, a professional coach, and I was always blessed, whether it be at a collegiate level or at the professional level or at the international level, to have trainers and doctors alongside of me in training and in games, to where if something were to happen, I'd send a trainer onto the field and you go make the diagnosis, you're the expert, and then come back to me and tell me whether or not this player should continue or not. But all you need to know that there's an enormous amount of pressure that is placed on those trainers and those doctors. Now, they're all trained and they're all professionals. But can you imagine, for example, a player that gets injured during a qualification period and knows that if he or she is out of camp or out of the national team for a while, what pressure would come to bear on that trainer and on that doctor to help them get released, to get back into competition. I can't tell you how many times I've had private conversations with players where they've come in and told me that I'm ready to play, and I said, no, the protocol is that the doctor must release you, and that's just the way it is. The good thing about that is that takes the pressure off the player, that takes the pressure off the coach, and it leaves it to the experts. The unfortunate part about this is that at the collegiate level and at the professional level and the national level, that's makes up maybe less than 1% of soccer here in the United States. And at the youth level, and now I'm the executive director and technical director of a club out in California. We have 50 teams, coaches and parents and players, and we just don't have those trainers and those doctors available on a daily basis. And so what's happening is that two kids will go up to collide heads during a training or during a game, and our coaches don't have the resources or the experience or the background with which to make a decision as to whether that player should stay on the field or not. Typically, if it's a bad collision, they'll bring them off the field, and if it's in the first half, then maybe the player convinces them that they're okay, they go back in the second half, and too often we allow that player to go back onto the field. And then I've experienced this firsthand, where that kid is allowed to go back onto the field and they incur another injury. It might not be in the same game, it might be in the next week. But then all of a sudden, something that could have been prevented, if we had the education with which to teach our coaches on what to look for and the risks involved with this, to take a very, very, very conservative approach, that when our young players collide or have a series of situations where they've headed the ball and they've come off with a headache, that we just don't put winning ahead of health. And so those individuals have to be told to go see a doctor, and that they're not going to come back to training, they're not going to come back to competition until a doctor has released them. There's an enormous amount of pressure on these kids. We have one U15 national pool player, an exceptional young lady that had 4 concussions in a period of 6 months, and went to UCLA Medical Center. They couldn't discover exactly what the issue was. Finally, they just said, we can't diagnose this, you have to stay out. They finally went and saw other experts, and they were this young lady was diagnosed with severe brain trauma, and she was probably had this severe brain trauma while she was competing and playing over those 6 months. Stayed out 8 months, and at the period of 8 months was told to stay out a year, but at the 8-month period she goes to her mother and says, "I've been invited into the ODP, can I please go?" And the mother says, "Maybe, let me talk to the doctors." She calls the doctors, tries to put pressure on the doctors say no. Right thing to do, right? 2 months later, same thing. Invited into national camp. "Mom, I'm giving up an opportunity to go participate with the national team. All my fellow teammates, they're bypassing me. Can I please go?" Mother goes back to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Well, okay, it's been 11 months. All right, we'll release you." 1 month later, she incurs another concussion. So now she's out for 2 years. So what's my point in all this? My point is that there has to be a debate across this country. There has to be a discussion, at what age do we teach heading? There has to be a discussion with greater emphasis for all of our coaches on the proper technique of heading. There has to be technology introduced such that we can measure these types of incidences on the field, whether it be in training and in games. And there has to be a method by which we don't take risk and don't put our athletes in undue risk. The pressure from parents to force the coach to put the player in to win, to gain exposure, pressure from the player towards the coach, and the pressure of the coach to win, are taking precedent over a player's health. And it happens over and over and over again. I would imagine that these three individuals here, at some point, whether it be a head injury or some other type of injury, right, wanted to get back on the field before they were physically ready to get back on the field. Whether it's to support a family, whether it's the fear of losing their spot on the team. And I think the debate is phenomenal. I'm really happy to be a part of the discussion, and I hope to be a part of the discussion going further. But as you can see with these three individuals, this is a real issue, and it's something that we have to address. Thank you.
Steve, thanks for it. And certainly it's my hope that part of the discussion, yes, but we all need to be part of the solution. These are not casualties of war. These are people with severe traumatic head injury that maybe not be preventable, but certainly diagnosed and then perhaps treated. Doctor, we know that if we break our knee and break our leg, we can get a new one. We know if we break our head, we may not be able to do that. I wonder if you could shed some light for us today on the hard science and measurement and what your recommendations are for the difficulties that these young people have faced.